The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
All right, a new crypto firm is trying to solve the CeFi problem by building an exchange that it says offers sophisticated trading services and is fully non-custodial. Ankex moved from alpha to beta testing this week, and joining us to discuss is Ankex CEO Michael Moro. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. All right. You've been in alpha for almost a year. Talk to us about what you've learned, any new developments since you were last on the show.
Sure. Happy to chat. So Ankex actually got started in November when Credo decided to incubate its take on kind of the future of crypto exchanges. I joined as CEO in April. And we actually entered alpha just about a month and a half to about 2 months ago. So we've been on this journey of testing the platform with some internal testers as well as some outside users on the platform, getting some liquidity added to the platform, and we finally reached our beta status. So we've had a waiting list of about 17,000 folks that we've started to slowly let on to the platform to continue to test. And give us feedback ultimately on the functionality. So it is a big milestone for us to get people actively using on the platform.
So what does this mean? You have a situation where people can they can trade, but they have their own custody, right? They control the custody of their coins. So God forbid you guys go out of business, something happens, they don't have to sit there in court in the Bahamas or in the United States or wherever it is you guys are and worry about it. But that said, first of all, what operations-wise, as a user, what happens? What's the difference between trading with you guys and trading with a centralized exchange? How do I notice any difference? Is there a lag? Is there an issue with liquidity? How is liquidity handled differently on your exchange versus a more centralized exchange where everyone's coins go into one giant wallet and God help you with everything?
So I think it's important to kind of differentiate how Ankex is ultimately set up. Think about traditional CeFi off-exchange, off-chain custody, exchange stack rather. So the matching engine, the risk engine, the central limit order book exists off-chain, similar to how CeFi exchanges are organized. The only difference is that the custody part is on-chain. So we're combining what we think is kind of the best of both worlds here of kind of the traditional investors being able to execute sophisticated trading in CeFi with low latency and sort of high frequency trader friendly. At the same time, trying to bring back kind of the not your keys, not your crypto ethos on the on-chain custody piece. And so it's not speed. It's not any different than trading on a CeFi exchange from a trading perspective, except for the fact that the coins remain in your wallet at all times. There is no sort of exchange wallet concept here. But users are able to, and certainly on our roadmap, be able to bring your own wallets and ultimately be able to trade on Ankex without pre-funding an account or having to send coins to an exchange before you're able to ultimately start trading. You can plug and play with your own wallet once you're set up on Ankex.
Can you talk a little bit about the regulatory challenges you might face with an exchange like this? Where is this exchange operating, and what are some of the regulatory challenges?
Sure. So we're getting licensed in the British Virgin Islands. So we're going as a virtual asset service provider in the BVI as our first step to getting licensed. And we are going to be getting licenses globally and slowly continue to upgrade the licenses that we get all around the world so that we're able to offer our products and services to more people and in more geographies around the world. The regulatory challenge ultimately is that separating custody and trading is actually a new thing in the crypto space. It's obviously well known in TradFi, but it is a new concept to regulators trying to regulate crypto. When they come to exchanges, custody is a part of the regulatory framework, and that piece is ultimately not responsible for Ankex because other providers are ultimately doing that. And so separating out those two functions has actually been interesting as folks in the regulatory space try to figure out, okay, what rules apply to an Ankex that is non-custodial in its entire nature, and all they're doing is kind of providing liquidity in a low latency type of way.
Does that change KYC, AML? I mean, you're in BVI, the rules are a little bit lax there compared to, say, New York State. But does the fact that you don't have custody of people's coins make it, say, more lax, if you will, because of it?
The AML KYC aspect is exactly the same. So people have to onboard, provide information about who they are to create an account ultimately on Ankex. And we will be doing kind of know your transaction type of stuff as well, of trying to figure out which coins are ultimately coming in and do they meet some of the information that they provided to us at the time of the onboarding. But the difference comes between, okay, how do we implement the travel rule? Concepts like that, where folks, I mean, in the exchange space generally, I'm still trying to figure that out. But, how can a non-custodial exchange basically be able to comply with kind of sending and receiving, information about who the coins are coming from and all of that, when the exchange itself in Ankex isn't a part of ultimately that transaction. And so those are some of the nuances that I think we're trying to figure out.
I guess the sanctioned individuals, such as those who may be involved in the situation in Ukraine and Iran, et cetera, like what kind of protections or what kind of things are you putting in place that would, let's say, keep them off the exchange, or do you let them go on?
No, our KYC AML restrictions restrict kind of OFAC people living in OFAC countries and other jurisdictions around the world regulatorily. And because we're setting up in the BVI, we are not serving U.S. clients, for instance. And so there is a geo blocking and obviously kind of blocking on the AML KYC side, onboarding side of the house as well, until we have the proper licensing to be able to serve those geographies and customers.
So you just said you're not serving U.S. clients. Have you had any conversations with American regulators that kind of led you to making that decision, or have you just kind of stayed out of the jurisdiction entirely?
So it's a couple different things. One, we're starting off with perpetual futures on our exchange, and CFTC does not regulate perpetual futures at this point in time. It is a product type that does not exist in TradFi, and so we have to work on with the regulators and have conversations about how perpetual futures works and getting them ultimately comfortable with regulating that, as opposed to kind of like term futures contracts that they're typically ultimately regulating. But at the same time, the regulatory and compliance burn that is required to comply with a license like the CFTC is significant, and the technology build is also significant as well. And so for a startup exchange like ours, we have quite a bit of work to do to be ready to apply for that license, certainly in the United States. And so it is certainly on our roadmap, but it is not a near-term roadmap item. It is certainly a couple of years away. But for us, luckily the rest of the world is a very big place, and there's plenty of volume and clients to be able to serve around the world. And then once the U.S. we feel is a good market for us, and from a timing perspective, we will certainly look to enter the U.S. when it makes sense.
A couple of years away sounds like a really long time to be operating in the rest of the world, leaving the U.S. out of the market. I mean, what are your thoughts on the regulatory sphere in the U.S.? It feels like it's really getting left behind here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's I'm not surprising anybody when we say that the U.S. and crypto don't get along, and so that's a sentiment that ultimately kind of needs to change, whether that's kind of politically and regulatorily. But for us, the narrative that kind of the innovation and job creation and things like that are happening abroad is 100% true. I am not hiring anybody in the United States. All of my hires and employees at Ankex are going to be non-US and kind of scattered all around the world. And so, part of that is obviously fantastic talent and kind of getting used to kind of remote hiring. But at the same time, there is a conscious effort here to avoid hiring within the United States, which certainly kind of goes along with kind of the innovation and hiring and employment in the crypto space, especially occurring outside the shores of the US.
All right, Michael, and just before we go, you were previously the CEO at Genesis Trading. We learned this week that Genesis ceased all crypto trading services. Any reaction to that news?
Yeah, look, I left Genesis, now over a year ago, and obviously lots have happened since my departure. I think ultimately I'm sad. about what happened. And, I've been following kind of the news along with everybody else. But ultimately, I think Genesis had, one of the most important roles in kind of creating an institutional asset class and making Bitcoin and crypto trading for institutional investors a thing which didn't exist before. So I'm certainly proud of everything that we accomplished previously. But at the same time, I can't help but be disappointed and sad at how things turned out, and certainly wish everyone there all the best, because I know they have fantastic and bright futures ahead for them in crypto as they go on with their careers.
All right, we should just quickly note that Genesis and CoinDesk are both owned by DCG. Michael, thanks for joining the show this morning. It was a pleasure chatting to you again.
Thanks for having me.
That was Ankex CEO Michael Moro.